Welcome back to O-Level Oasis, your trusted guide for CAIE exams. Today, we're diving into O-Level Biology Chapter 8, which is Human Nutrition. We'll be working through past paper questions together to strengthen our understanding of the concepts we have already covered in this chapter. Also, I've attached this compiled topical past papers in the description and pinned comment below. Make sure to check it out and try solving it on your own first for self-practice, before watching this video. Alright, let's get started. So, let's take a look at our first question. The question begins by stating, maltase is an enzyme found in the intestines of vertebrates, including humans. And, Part A, of this question asks us to complete Table 2.1, which provides descriptions of words related to the activity of maltase. The first row has been completed for you, so you can see the table has two columns, one for the word, and one for how it relates to the activity of maltase. The first row, already completed, tells us that maltase is an enzyme found in vertebrate intestines. Now, we are given 4 more entries to complete, so, let's think about it. Here, we know that maltase is an enzyme, and the enzymes act on substrates. In this case, the substrate is maltose, because maltase is a type of protein called an enzyme. Enzymes work by acting on specific molecules called substrates. In this case, the molecule that maltase works on is maltose. So, maltose is the starting material for the reaction. Then the enzyme breaks maltose down into glucose, which is the product, so the glucose is produced when maltose is broken down. Next, which part of the enzyme binds to the substrate? Here we'll write active site. The enzyme has a specific region called the active site where the substrate fits, like a key in a lock. This is where the chemical reaction actually takes place. Without the active site, the enzyme cannot interact with the substrate. And here it says, enzymes are specific, meaning each enzyme typically acts on only one type of substrate. Enzymes are very selective. Maltase will only act on maltose, not on other sugars. This specificity ensures that each reaction in the body occurs correctly. Now let's move to Part B. We're told, vampire bats live in South America and feed entirely on blood. They are the only known vertebrates which do not have maltase in their intestines. Then we're asked, suggest an explanation for this. So, here's how we can approach it. Since maltase breaks down maltose, and maltose usually comes from carbohydrates like starch, we should ask, is maltose present in blood? And if not, would the bat even need this enzyme? So, we will write, vampire bats feed only on blood, which contains glucose but little or no maltose. Because their diet lacks maltose, there is no need for maltase in their intestines. As a result, vampire bats do not produce this enzyme, which also helps them conserve energy by not making something unnecessary. Over time, they may have evolved without the functional gene for maltase. Next, let's take a look at this question involving hormones and blood glucose regulation. We're given a paragraph with missing words, and in the A part, we're told to use words from the list to complete the paragraph. The list of words includes platelets, glucagon, pancreas, plasma, liver, sucrose, endocrine, pituitary, insulin, glycogen. So this is a multiple choice style question, but in paragraph form. We need to pick the correct word from the list for each blank space. Before jumping into the answers, let's understand what the paragraph is about. This paragraph describes how glucose is transported in the blood, and how the body responds when blood glucose levels rise above normal. Here's how we'll approach it. First, glucose is carried in plasma, which is the liquid part of blood. Then, when glucose levels go up, the body releases a hormone. This hormone is insulin. Insulin is made by a special type of gland, an endocrine gland, which means it releases hormones directly into the bloodstream. The specific endocrine gland in this case is the pancreas. Finally, insulin helps lower blood glucose by converting it into glycogen, which is a storage form found mostly in the liver and muscles. Now, let's move to Part B of the question. Here, Figure 3.1 shows a photomicrograph of a blood cell magnified 5,000 times. When we look closely at the image, we can see that the cell has a disc-like shape with a thinner center and thicker edges. This is the characteristic shape of a red blood cell. Here we know the correct answer is simply red blood cell. Let's now look at a question that relates to what happens when blood glucose levels are not properly controlled, a situation that can occur in people with diabetes. If the concentration of glucose in the blood increases above normal and is not controlled, this can result in changes to some cells of this type. They may lose their specialized shape, become less flexible, stick together with many other cells of the same type. Suggest and explain how these changes will affect the body. So, this question is talking about red blood cells, which are responsible for carrying oxygen in the blood. If high blood glucose damages them, they may lose their shape, meaning they won't function properly. We're asked to suggest and explain the effects on the body, so we're going to describe the consequences of these red blood cell changes, using physiological reasoning. So, we will simply write, when red blood cells lose their specialized shape and become less flexible, their surface area is reduced. This makes them less efficient at absorbing and carrying oxygen, which is normally transported by hemoglobin. These misshapen cells may also struggle to pass through narrow capillaries, reducing blood flow and oxygen delivery to tissues. Additionally, if they stick together, they can form clots, which increases the risk of blocked blood vessels. With less oxygen being supplied to cells, the rate of aerobic respiration decreases, meaning less energy is produced for normal bodily functions. Now coming on to the MCQ, the first one says, the diagram shows part of the human digestive system. Which parts produce bile and store bile? We have 4 labeled parts, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now remember, bile is produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Looking at the diagram, part 1 represents the liver and part 4 represents the gallbladder. So the parts that produce and store bile are 1 and 4. Therefore, the correct answer is option B. Now coming on to the next MCQ. The question says, the diagram shows a section through a villus. What is the main role of vessel X? If we recall, inside a villus, there are 2 main types of vessels. Blood capillaries, which absorb glucose and amino acids, and lacteals, which absorb fatty acids and glycerol into the lymphatic system. So here, vessel X refers to the lacteal, whose main function is to transfer fatty acids and glycerol to the lymph system. Therefore, the correct answer is option D. Next, this question asks, which part of the human digestive system is a major region for assimilation of amino acids? Now remember, assimilation means the process where absorbed nutrients are used by body cells, for example, amino acids being used to build proteins. This mainly happens in the liver, which plays a key role in converting amino acids into body proteins or other useful substances. So, the major region for assimilation of amino acids is the liver. Therefore, the correct answer is option A.